The truck's engine ticked as it cooled in the afternoon heat. Cormac Doyle sat behind the wheel, staring at the familiar red Camry parked in his daughter's driveway. Leona's car, the same car that should have been 300 miles south in Georgia, tending to her sick aunt. He checked his watch. 2:15 on a Tuesday. Maeve would be at work. Nolan's shift at the logistics company ended at 3. Cormac turned off the ignition and stepped out. The metal toolbox in his truck bed could wait. This couldn't. He walked around the side of the house, his work boots silent on the grass. The living room window faced the backyard, curtains half drawn. Through the gap, he could see movement inside. Leona's laugh carried through the glass. Not the polite laugh she used at company dinners or church events. The real one. The one he hadn't heard in months. Cormac crouched beside the air conditioning unit, hidden behind the hedge. He pulled out his phone and opened the voice recorder app. "God, you feel so good." Leona's voice drifted from inside. "Your husband doesn't know what he's got," came the reply. Nolan's voice, breathless and low. Cormac's jaw tightened, but his hands remained steady. He held the phone toward the window. "He's clueless," Leona said, clearer now. "Once the LLC moves the assets, we file for divorce. Let him rot with the business while we cash out. How much do you think we can get?" "The company's worth at least $400,000. The house is paid off, another $250, plus his retirement accounts." She paused. "We've already moved $97,000 to Kevin's account. He doesn't even check the statements." Nolan chuckled. "Your daughter's going to hate us. Maeve will understand eventually. Her father's an emotional wall. Always has been. She knows that." Cormac stopped the recording. 37 seconds of crystal clear audio. More than enough. He stood slowly, his knees protesting after 28 years of factory work. The sound from inside continued, but he'd heard what he needed. Walking back to his truck, Cormac's mind shifted into the mode that had built his business from nothing. Emotion was weakness. Evidence was strength. And now he had both motive and method. The engine started on the first turn. He drove away without looking back at the house. The machine shop hummed with the familiar rhythm of productivity. Cormac sat in his office, watching his employees through the glass partition. 32 people depended on him for their livelihoods. 32 families who trusted him to keep the orders coming and the paycheck steady. He'd built this from a two-man operation in a rented garage. Back when his first wife, Catherine, was alive to see him come home with grease under his nails and pride in his voice. Catherine had died when Maeve was 16. Heart attack at 41, no warning signs. The doctors said it happens sometimes, especially in women. The stress of running a household while her husband built a business. Cormac had blamed himself for exactly 1 week. Then he gotten back to work because bills didn't pay themselves and his daughter needed college money. 2 years later, at Catherine's grave on her birthday, he'd met Leona. She was visiting her grandmother's plot 3 rows over, wearing a green dress that caught the morning light. She'd smiled at him, said something about how peaceful the cemetery felt in spring. Leona was everything Catherine hadn't been. Outgoing where Catherine was quiet. Spontaneous where Catherine planned. She filled the house with laughter again, made Maeve smile during her senior year. They married when Maeve was 19. A small ceremony at the courthouse, just the 3 of them and Rennie Carver as witness. Leona moved into the house Catherine had chosen, slept in the bed Catherine had shared with him for 18 years. For a while, it worked. Leona understood that Cormac wasn't a man who shared his feelings easily. His father had raised him to solve problems, not discuss them. To provide, not emote. She seemed to accept that part of him. When Maeve brought Nolan home during her junior year at UT, Cormac saw trouble immediately. Too much charm, too little substance. The kind of man who shook hands like he was running for office and called everyone buddy or pal. "He makes me laugh, Dad," Maeve had said when Cormac expressed his doubts. "Your mother made you laugh. That doesn't mean she should run the machine shop." But Maeve was 26 by then, working as a marketing coordinator in town, old enough to make her own mistakes. Cormac walked her down the aisle and handed her off to Nolan with a smile that fooled everyone except Rennie. "That boy's going to cost you," Rennie had whispered during the reception. "How much?" Cormac had asked. "More than money." Now, 3 years later, Cormac understood what his old friend had meant He opened his desk drawer and pulled out the small recorder he'd used for taking inventory notes. The audio from this afternoon was already uploaded to his computer, backed up in 3 separate locations. Cormac had learned long ago that successful men didn't react on emotion. They planned. They prepared. They struck when the time was right. The time wasn't right yet, but it would be soon. Rennie Carver's law office occupied the 2nd floor of a restored Victorian house on State Street. The same office where he'd helped Cormac incorporate his business 23 years ago, back when the company was just an idea and a handshake. "You look like hell," Rennie said, gesturing to the leather chair across from his desk. "I feel worse." Cormac sat down and pulled out his phone. "I need you to listen to something." He played the recording without preamble. Rennie's expression shifted from curiosity to concern to cold anger as the voices filled the small office. "Jesus Christ, Cormac. Can you use this in court?" "Depends. Was she in a place where she had reasonable expectation of privacy?" "My daughter's house. With my son-in-law. While my daughter was at work." Rennie leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. "It's admissible, but we need more than adultery to protect your assets. Tennessee's a no-fault state." "What about the theft?" "That's different. $97,000 from business accounts." Rennie pulled out a legal pad. "We can work with that. But first, tell me about this LLC." Cormac had done his homework on the drive over. Nolan's cousin Kevin owns a shell company called Altman Holdings. Registered in Delaware 6 months ago. Leona's listed as a business advisor. "How do you know all this?" "Public records. Amazing what you can find online if you know where to look." Rennie made notes as he talked. "We need to move fast. If they're planning to file for divorce, they're probably going to accelerate the asset transfer. What do you recommend?" "First, we document everything. Bank records, business accounts, property deeds. Second, we restructure your holdings to protect them from division. Third, we wait for them to make the next move." Cormac nodded. "How long do we have?" "Depends on how greedy they get. The more they take, the stronger our case becomes." Rennie set down his pen. "But I have to ask, are you sure you want to go down this road? Divorce is one thing. Criminal charges are another. They stole from me, Rennie. From my business. From the people who work for me. I know. But once we start this, there's no going back. Leona's going to fight, and she'll use every weapon she can find." Cormac stood up. "Let her try. I've got better weapons." After leaving Rennie's office, Cormac drove to the bank. His relationship manager, Tom Patterson, had been handling the company accounts for 8 years. "I need a complete audit of all transactions over the past year," Cormac said. "Business and personal accounts." Tom frowned. "Is there a problem?" "Maybe. I want to know every penny that went out and where it went." It took an hour to print everything. Tom walked him through the statements, highlighting unusual transfers and explaining the bank's fraud protection policies. The evidence was damning. $97,000 in 17 separate transfers, all to accounts linked to Altman Holdings. The transfers had started small, $3,000 here, $5,000 there, but grown bolder over time. The last transfer, made just a week ago, was for $15,000. "The signatures all match," Tom said. "Both yours and your wife's. But the timing's unusual. Most of these happened when you were out of town on business." Cormac remembered those trips. Sales calls in Memphis, equipment inspections in Nashville. Leona had access to the accounts, had helped with business paperwork for years. He'd trusted her completely. "Can you flag the accounts for unusual activity?" Cormac asked. "Already done. Any transfer over $5,000 will require your approval in person." Driving home, Cormac felt the familiar calm that came with having a plan. He'd spent his entire adult life solving problems methodically, breaking complex challenges into manageable pieces. This was just another problem. More personal than most, but no different in principle, that he pulled into his driveway at 6:30. Leona's car was there, parked in its usual spot. The house lights were on, warm and welcoming from the outside. Inside, Leona was setting the table for dinner. She looked up when he entered, her smile bright and natural. "You're late tonight," she said, rising on her toes to kiss his cheek. "Rough day at the shop. Equipment delivery ran long." The lie came easily. "Smells good in here. Pot roast. Your favorite." She moved around the kitchen with practiced efficiency, the same woman who'd made him laugh at Catherine's graveside all those years ago. The same woman who'd raised his daughter and shared his bed and built a life with him. The same woman who was stealing from him and planning to destroy everything he'd worked for. "How was your day?" he asked. "Quiet. Ran some errands, did some grocery shopping. Called my aunt in Georgia." She paused, stirring the gravy. "I might need to visit her next week. She's not doing well." Cormac nodded, cutting his meat with deliberate precision. "Take all the time you need." They ate in comfortable silence, discussing mundane topics like the weather and weekend plans. Leona mentioned wanting to redecorate the guest bedroom. Cormac agreed it was a good idea. After dinner, while Leona watched television in the living room, Cormac sat at his computer in the home office. He opened a new document and began typing out a timeline of events. Bank records, phone logs, property titles, everything organized and cross-referenced, building a case as methodically as he'd built his business. "They think I'll burn the house down," he muttered to himself, fingers steady on the keyboard. "I'll just take the roof off and watch them freeze." The law offices of Kendall and Associates occupied the entire 15th floor of the tallest building in downtown Knoxville. Silas Kendall had built his reputation on estate planning for the wealthy, helping them protect their assets from taxes, lawsuits, and family disputes. Cormac sat across from the silver-haired attorney, watching him review the documents Rennie had prepared. "This is extensive," Silas said, adjusting his reading glasses. "Your friend Carver is thorough. He's had 23 years to learn my business. The trust structure he's proposing is sound. Transferring your assets to an irrevocable trust with your daughter as beneficiary will remove them from marital property." Silas looked up. "But once we do this, there's no undoing it. These assets won't be yours anymore, legally speaking. Will I maintain control? As trustee, yes. You'll manage everything as you do now. But ownership transfers to Maeve immediately." Cormac had spent 3 sleepless nights considering this decision. Giving up legal ownership of everything he'd built went against every instinct he possessed. But keeping it meant losing half to Leona in a divorce. How long will the process take? 2 weeks if we move quickly. The trust documents need to be filed, property deeds transferred, business ownership restructured. Silas made notes on his legal pad. "Your daughter will need to sign consent forms. She doesn't know yet. When will you tell her?" "When the time is right." Silas studied him carefully. "Mr. Doyle, I've been doing this for 30 years. I've seen men try to hide assets from their wives before. It usually backfires. I'm not hiding anything. I'm protecting it." "From whom?" Cormac pulled out his phone and played the recording. Silas listened without expression, making occasional notes. "This changes things," Silas said when the audio ended. "With evidence of fraud and conspiracy, the court will be more sympathetic to asset protection measures. Can we move forward? Today if you want. I'll need signatures on about 40 documents, but we can have everything filed by Friday." They worked for 3 hours, signing papers and initializing changes. Trust documents, quitclaim deeds, corporate restructuring agreements. Each signature transferred another piece of Cormac's life's work into legal protection. "Your wife is going to be very unhappy when she finds out," Silas warned. "My wife is already unhappy. She just doesn't know I know it yet." The next day, Cormac met with his accountant to restructure the business finances. All company assets were transferred to the trust, making Maeve the technical owner of Doyle Manufacturing while leaving Cormac as the operational manager. "This is unusual," his accountant said. "Most people wait until retirement to transfer ownership to their children. I'm planning ahead. What does Leona think about this?" Leona doesn't need to worry about business decisions anymore. By the end of the week, the transformation was complete. On paper, Cormac owned almost nothing. The house, the business, the investment accounts, even his truck were all held in trust for Maeve's benefit. But he still controlled everything, still made every decision, still signed every check. The only difference was that Leona no longer had any legal claim to any of it. Cormac found his opportunity on a Thursday evening. Maeve had stopped by the house to borrow Leona's bread maker for a dinner party she was hosting. Dad, can I ask you something? She said, following him to his office while Leona searched the kitchen cabinets. What's on your mind? Has Mom mentioned anything about investment? Nolan keeps talking about some business opportunity, but he won't give me details. Cormac kept his expression neutral. What kind of business? Something about a limited liability company. He says your friend Rennie recommended it, but when I called Rennie's office, his secretary said he'd never heard of it. That's strange. Cormac opened his desk drawer and pulled out a folder. Did Nolan ever mention the name Kevin Altman? Maeve frowned. That's his cousin in Delaware. Why? Just curious. Altman Holdings LLC was registered in Delaware 6 months ago. Your mother's listed as a business advisor. What? Maeve leaned forward. Mom's involved in this. I don't know. Maybe you should ask her. I will. Maeve's jaw tightened. And I'm going to ask Nolan too. I'm tired of being left out of financial decisions. The confrontation happened that weekend. Cormac was in his garage, organizing tools, when he heard raised voices from Maeve's house next door. He couldn't make out words, but the tone was unmistakable. Maeve showed up at his front door an hour later, her eyes red with anger. You were right about Nolan, she said without preamble. Leona appeared in the hallway behind them. Maeve, honey, what's wrong? Ask your business partner. Leona's face went pale. I don't know what you mean. Altman Holdings, Mom. The LLC you're advising for. The one that's been receiving money from Dad's business accounts. Cormac watched his wife struggle to find words. The calculation in her eyes was visible, weighing options and consequences. That's not what it sounds like, Leona said finally. Then explain it to me. Maeve crossed her arms. Because I just spent 2 hours looking through bank records, and I found transfers totaling almost $100,000 to your boyfriend's cousin. He's not my. I know about the affair. The silence stretched between them like a wound. Leona looked from her daughter to her husband, searching for an ally and finding none. How long have you known? She asked Cormac. Long enough. And you said nothing. I wanted to see how far you'd go. Leona's composure cracked. This isn't fair. You can't ambush me like this. You ambushed yourself, Maeve said. I found hotel receipts in Nolan's truck. Credit card charges for dinners I never ate. Text messages to someone saved in his phone as L.D. Your father shut me out emotionally years ago. I was lonely, so you decided to steal from him. I decided to protect myself. Do you know what it's like being married to a man who treats you like a business partner? Cormac stepped forward. I treated you like my wife. I gave you a home, a life, respect in this community. And you repaid me by robbing me. I repaid you by staying married to a man who forgot how to love me. Love doesn't steal, Leona. Love doesn't lie and scheme and manipulate. She looked at Maeve, tears streaming down her face. He's not the man you think he is, sweetheart. He's cold, distant. I tried for years to reach him. By sleeping with my husband. That wasn't supposed to happen. It just developed. Over 6 months of planned theft. Leona wiped her eyes. What do you want from me? An apology? Fine. I'm sorry. I'm sorry I fell in love with someone who actually talks to me. I'm sorry I tried to secure my future with a man who remembers I exist. You're sorry you got caught, Cormac said quietly. Yes, I'm sorry I got caught. Because now you're going to make me pay for being human. I'm going to make you pay for being a thief. Leona stared at him for a long moment. What happens now? Now you pack your things and leave. Tonight. This is my house too. Actually, it's not. Cormac pulled out a document from his shirt pocket. As of last Friday, this house belongs to a trust managed for Maeve's benefit. You have no legal claim to it. Leona's face went white. You can't do that. I already did. Your belongings will be packed and delivered to wherever you're staying. You have 1 hour to take whatever you need for tonight. Maeve, please. You can't support this. Maeve looked at her mother with a mixture of sadness and disgust. You betrayed Dad. You betrayed me. You betrayed our entire family for money and a man who's not worth it. Nolan loves me. Nolan loves Dad's money. The same money you helped him steal. Leona walked upstairs without another word. They could hear drawers opening and closing, hangers rattling in the closet. Are you okay? Cormac asked his daughter. No, but I will be. Maeve sat down heavily in the living room chair. I can't believe she did this to us. People make choices. Sometimes those choices have consequences. What about the business? The money they took, that's being handled legally. Rennie's filed the appropriate motions. And Nolan, what about him? Are you going to let him get away with this? Cormac smiled for the first time in weeks. Nolan's going to find out what happens when you steal from the wrong person. Maeve came to the machine shop the next morning, carrying 2 cups of coffee and a manila folder thick with documents. I couldn't sleep last night, she said, settling into the chair across from Cormac's desk. So I did some research. What kind of research? The kind that involves public records, credit reports, and a private investigator I hired online. She opened the folder. Dad, Nolan's been lying to us about everything. Cormac accepted the coffee and waited for her to continue. His employment history is fabricated. The logistics company hired him based on references from companies that don't exist. His college degree is from a diploma mill. Even his work experience before we met is suspicious. She spread documents across the desk like evidence at a trial. Credit reports, background checks, employment verification forms. How long has he been planning this? Cormac asked. At least 2 years. Maybe longer. He's got credit cards I never knew about, a separate bank account, and he's been moving money into cryptocurrency wallets. How much? Beside what he stole from you. Another $30,000 from our joint accounts. Money I thought was going toward our mortgage payments. Cormac studied the documents. The scope of the deception was impressive in its thoroughness. Nolan hadn't just seduced his wife. He constructed an entire false identity to facilitate the theft. There's more, Maeve said. I contacted his previous girlfriends. Found 3 of them on social media. He ran the same scam on 2 of them. What happened to those women? One lost her house. The other lost her business. He disappears when the money runs out or when they get suspicious. Why didn't they report him to the police? Same reason Mom probably won't. He's careful about keeping everything technically legal. He manipulates women into giving him access to their finances, then drains them slowly enough that it looks like legitimate expenses. Cormac leaned back in his chair. What do you want to do about it? I want to destroy him. Legally. Completely. I wanted to pay for what he did to our family. That's going to require cooperation between us. Complete cooperation. No secrets, no second guessing. What do you need from me? Cormac pulled out his own folder, twice as thick as hers. Everything I've collected over the past 2 weeks. Bank records, property transfers, incorporation documents, audio recordings. He walked her through each piece of evidence, explaining the legal strategy Rennie had developed. The fraud charges that would be filed against both Leona and Nolan. The asset recovery actions. The divorce proceedings that would leave them with nothing. This is war, he concluded. Not a family dispute. Not a misunderstanding. War. If you're not prepared for that, tell me now. Maeve studied the documents for several minutes. When she looked up, her expression reminded Cormac of his own father's face during difficult business negotiations. I'm prepared, she said. What's the first move? We let them think they've won. Let them get comfortable with their plan. The more evidence they create, the stronger our case becomes. How long do we wait? Not long. Nolan's pattern suggests he'll accelerate the timeline once he realizes you're suspicious. He'll want to extract as much money as possible before disappearing. And Mom, your mother made her choice. She chose Nolan over her family. Now she'll live with the consequences. Maeve nodded slowly. I keep thinking about when I was little after Mom Catherine died. You were so sad, but you never broke down. You just kept working, kept taking care of me, kept building the business. That's what men do. We solve problems. I used to wish you'd cry sometimes. Show some emotion. Let me comfort you the way you comforted me. Would that have helped? I thought it would, but now I understand. Emotion is weakness when people are depending on you. When there are problems to solve and battles to fight. Cormac reached across the desk and squeezed his daughter's hand. You're stronger than I gave you credit for. I learned from the best. They spent the rest of the morning refining their strategy. Maeve would return home and act normally, giving Nolan no indication that she suspected anything. She would monitor his activities, document any new thefts, and report back daily. Meanwhile, Cormac would coordinate with Rennie to prepare the legal assault. Fraud charges, divorce papers, asset recovery motions. Everything timed to hit simultaneously, giving neither Leona nor Nolan time to react or retreat. "There's one more thing," Maeve said as she prepared to leave. "I want to change my name back to Doyle after the divorce." "What?" "Because I'm proud of what that name represents. What you built. What you've taught me." She paused. "And because I never want to share a name with a man who tried to destroy my family." The process server found Leona at the coffee shop where she met her book club every Tuesday morning. Cormac watched from his truck across the street as the young man approached her table and handed her the envelope. Her face went through a predictable sequence of emotions. Confusion, then recognition, then panic as she tore open the papers and read the contents. Divorce petition. Asset freeze motion. Temporary restraining order. Fraud charges referred to the district attorney's office. Her friends gathered around her, offering comfort and asking questions she couldn't answer. Leona fumbled for her phone, probably calling Nolan or her lawyer or both. Cormac drove away before she noticed him. Nolan received his papers at work, served in front of his supervisor and half the logistics company's office staff. The private investigator, Maeve, had hired captured video of the entire encounter from the parking lot. "He tried to run," she reported later. "Got halfway to his car before the server caught up with him." By noon, both Leona and Nolan were in custody, arrested on fraud charges that carried potential sentences of 5 to 10 years. Their phones were confiscated, their computers seized, their bank accounts frozen pending investigation. The local newspaper ran the story that afternoon. Local business owner's wife and son-in-law charged with embezzlement. The article included their mugshots and a detailed accounting of the stolen funds. Cormac's phone rang constantly. Reporters wanting interviews, friends offering support, competitors probably hoping for gossip. He ignored them all. "The IRS is auditing Altman Holdings," Rennie reported during their meeting that evening. "They're treating it as a criminal tax evasion case now that we've provided evidence of fraud." What about Kevin Altman? Cooperating fully. Claims he had no knowledge of the source of the funds. Says Nolan told him it was investment capital from legitimate business partnerships. Do you believe him? Doesn't matter. He's returning every penny to avoid prosecution. Nolan and Leona are the primary targets now. Bail, set at $50,000 each. Neither can make it. They're going to sit in jail until trial unless someone posts for them. Cormac felt no satisfaction from that news. He wanted justice, not revenge. But the distinction seemed less important now that the process was in motion. "There's something else," Rennie continued. "Nolan's employment history. We had it verified. Maeve already told me it was fabricated. It's worse than that. He's been using false identities for at least 5 years. The Social Security Administration is investigating him for identity fraud. Immigration is looking into whether his citizenship documents are legitimate. How deep does this go? Deep enough that he's facing federal charges in addition to the state fraud case. If convicted on everything, he's looking at 20 years minimum." That evening, Cormac sat in his office reviewing the damage assessment. The total theft was actually higher than originally calculated, $127,000 from business accounts, plus another $43,000 from personal savings that Leona had accessed using joint account privileges. But the money wasn't the real loss. The real loss was trust. The knowledge that the woman he'd shared his life with for 8 years had viewed him as nothing more than a resource to be exploited. His phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "Please talk to me. I can explain everything." Cormac deleted the message without responding. The foreclosure notice appeared in the newspaper's legal section 2 weeks later. Nolan and Maeve's house, purchased 3 years earlier with a mortgage that Nolan had apparently stopped paying months ago while diverting the payments to his cryptocurrency accounts. He leveraged everything. Maeve explained during their daily briefing. The house, his truck, even the furniture was financed. He's been living on borrowed money while stealing ours. "What about your accounts?" "Frozen. The court appointed a receiver to sort through our finances and determine what belongs to whom. I'll probably get back about 20 cents on the dollar. You can stay in the guest room as long as you need." "Thanks, Dad. I don't know what I would have done without you through this." Cormac poured himself another cup of coffee. "Have you heard from your mother? Her lawyer called yesterday. She wants to meet with me. Privately." "What did you tell him?" "That any communication goes through our attorneys. I'm not interested in her excuses or apologies." The bankruptcy filing came next. Nolan's creditors had discovered his arrest and were demanding immediate payment on multiple defaulted loans. Without access to Cormac's money, he couldn't maintain the facade of financial stability. His credit score dropped to 400 overnight, Maeve reported. His truck was repossessed yesterday. The furniture company is scheduled to empty the house on Friday. Where is he living? Motel on Clinton Highway, the kind that rents by the week. And Leona, her sister in Memphis, posted bail. But she can't leave the state, and she has to check in with a probation officer twice a week. Cormac nodded. The system was working exactly as designed. Nolan's carefully constructed false identity was collapsing under the weight of legal scrutiny. Leona's comfortable life was dissolving into poverty and public humiliation. There's something else, Maeve said. Nolan's lawyer contacted Rennie about a plea bargain. What kind of plea? Full restitution, guilty plea to reduce charges, and testimony against Mom in exchange for a shorter sentence. What did Rennie say? That we'd consider it if the restitution is complete and immediate. Every penny, plus interest and penalties. How much would that be? About $200,000. Money he doesn't have and can't get. So no deal. No deal. He goes to trial on all charges. The trial was scheduled for October, but Cormac doubted it would last that long. Nolan's legal situation was deteriorating daily as investigators uncovered more evidence of fraud dating back years. His immigration status was under review. His employment had been terminated for falsifying records. His credit was destroyed, his assets seized, his reputation ruined. The private investigator found 2 more victims, Maeve reported the following week. Women in Florida and North Carolina who were scammed the same way. They're willing to testify. How much did he steal from them? $70,000 from one, $90,000 from the other. Same pattern: fake identity, false employment records, romantic manipulation, gradual financial exploitation. Will they get their money back? Probably not. He spent most of it before moving on to the next victim. Cormac felt a cold satisfaction at that news, but also something that might have been pity. The women Nolan had victimized were probably decent people who'd made the mistake of trusting a charming sociopath. Like Leona had, like Maeve had, like he had. The meeting request came through Rennie's office on a Thursday afternoon in September. Leona wanted to see Cormac privately, without lawyers present. She claimed to have information that would be beneficial to his case. It's probably a trap, Rennie warned. Her attorney might be trying to get you to say something they can use against you. What could I possibly say that would hurt our case? That you knew about the affair longer than you disclosed. That you deliberately entrapped them. That your asset transfers were made in bad faith to avoid marital property division. Cormac considered this. What if I record the conversation? Tennessee is a one-party consent state. You can record any conversation you're part of. But are you sure you want to do this? She asked for the meeting. I want to hear what she has to say. They met in the garden behind the house where they'd lived together for 8 years. Leona arrived precisely at 6, driving a borrowed car and wearing clothes he didn't recognize. She looked older than her 48 years. The stress of the past 3 months had carved lines around her eyes and mouth. Her hair was shorter, less carefully styled. She moved with the defeated posture of someone who'd run out of options. "Thank you for agreeing to see me," she said, sitting on the stone bench beside the rose bushes she'd planted 2 springs ago. Cormac remained standing. "What do you want?" "To explain. To apologize. To try to fix what's broken between us." "Nothing's broken, Leona. You stole from me. You betrayed me. You planned to destroy everything I've worked for. Those aren't mistakes or misunderstandings. They're choices. I know how it looks. It looks like exactly what it is. Theft. Adultery. Conspiracy." She started crying then, the same tears that had moved him 8 years ago at Catherine's graveside. But tears were just salt water now. They changed nothing. "We were dying, Cormac. Our marriage was dying. You shut me out emotionally years ago. I felt like I was living with a stranger. So you decided to rob the stranger. I decided to protect myself from a man who'd forgotten how to love me. Love doesn't steal, Leona, and it doesn't ignore either. When was the last time you told me you loved me? When was the last time we had a real conversation about anything that mattered?" Cormac pulled out a document from his jacket pocket. "I brought something for you to sign." What is it? A settlement agreement. You waive all claims to marital property, business assets, and spousal support. In exchange, you get $1,000 and the car you drove here tonight. Leona stared at the papers. That's all? After 8 years of marriage. That's more than you deserve after stealing from me for 6 months. The house is worth $250,000. The business is worth 4 times that. I'm entitled to half under Tennessee law. You were entitled to half. Before you committed felony theft. Before you conspired with your lover to defraud me. Before you destroyed any claim to fairness or consideration. A judge won't see it that way. A judge will see a woman who stole $170,000 from her husband and planned to steal more. A judge will see recorded evidence of conspiracy and fraud. A judge will see a criminal who wants to profit from her crimes. Leona read through the settlement agreement, her face growing paler with each page. What if I refuse to sign? Then you go to trial. Face 20 years in prison. Lose everything anyway, plus whatever money you still have access to in legal fees. This isn't fair. Fair would have been you asking for a divorce if you were unhappy. Fair would have been marriage counseling or mediation or any solution that didn't involve stealing from me. I made a mistake. You made a choice. Every transfer, every lie, every day you spent with Nolan was a choice. You chose him over me. You chose money over family. You chose crime over honesty. I chose a man who remembered I existed, who talked to me like I mattered, who made me feel alive again. And look where that choice led you. Leona was quiet for several minutes, staring at the rose bushes that would bloom next spring in a garden she'd never see again. What happens to Nolan? Nolan faces federal fraud charges, identity theft, immigration violations, and conspiracy. He'll be lucky to see freedom again before he's 60. He really loves me. You know, this wasn't just about money for him. Then he'll have 20 years to think about that love in federal prison. She signed the settlement agreement with shaking hands, each signature transferring away any claim to the life she'd shared with him. I'm sorry, Cormac, for all of it. I know you don't believe me, but I am. I believe you're sorry you got caught. I'm sorry I hurt you. Sorry I hurt Maeve. Sorry I destroyed our family for a man who wasn't worth it. Cormac folded the signed documents and put them back in his jacket. Goodbye, Leona. He walked toward the house without looking back. Behind him, he heard her crying again, but the sound carried no more weight than wind in the trees. Inside, Maeve was waiting in the kitchen with 2 cups of coffee and a satisfied expression. How did it go? It's over. Finally over. Did she sign? Every page. She gets $1,000 and whatever car she borrowed. Everything else belongs to the trust. Good. Maeve handed him a coffee. Rennie called while you were outside. Nolan's lawyer withdrew from the case. Apparently, his client can't pay legal fees anymore. What does that mean? He'll get a public defender. Someone who's never handled a federal fraud case and has about 30 minutes to prepare his defense. When's the trial? October 15th, 3 weeks from today. Cormac sat down at the kitchen table where he'd eaten breakfast with Leona for 8 years, where they discussed business decisions and family plans and all the mundane details of shared life. Are you okay? Maeve asked. I'm tired, but I'm okay. Any regrets? About which part? Any of it? Mom. Nolan. The way it ended. Cormac considered the question seriously. I regret trusting people who didn't deserve trust. I regret not seeing the warning signs earlier. I regret that you got hurt in the process. But not the outcome. The outcome was justice. People who steal face consequences. People who betray their families lose their families. People who destroy trust don't get second chances. No forgiveness. Forgiveness is for mistakes, sweetheart. This wasn't a mistake. This was a calculated plan to destroy me and steal everything I've worked for. You don't forgive that. You prevent it from happening again. Maeve nodded. So what happens now? Now we rebuild. The business is stronger than ever. Our family is smaller, but more honest. And we've learned to trust carefully and verify everything. And they learn to live with the consequences of their choices. 6 months later, Cormac stood in the new office at Doyle Manufacturing's second location, watching Maeve conduct a meeting with potential clients. She'd proven herself a natural at business development, combining his analytical skills with a warmth that put customers at ease. The company had grown by 30% since the scandal broke. Competitors had expected the negative publicity to hurt business, but the opposite happened. Customers respected a man who'd handled betrayal with dignity and justice rather than violence or melodrama. Nolan had been sentenced to 18 years in federal prison after being convicted on all charges. His appeals were denied, his citizenship revoked, and his deportation scheduled to occur at the end of his sentence. Leona had received 3 years probation and community service after testifying against her former lover. She lived in Memphis now, working as a cashier at a grocery store and sharing a one-bedroom apartment with her sister. They would both survive. They would both start over. But they would do it with the permanent knowledge that choices have consequences, and some consequences last forever. Maeve had filed for divorce the day after Nolan's sentencing and legally changed her name back to Doyle. She wore the name like armor now, proud of what it represented and determined to help it grow. Dad, she appeared in his office doorway. The Patterson account signed the contract. We're officially their exclusive parts supplier. Good work. What's next? I have 3 more meetings this afternoon, and I want to discuss expansion plans for next year. Cormac smiled at his daughter's enthusiasm. We'll talk tonight over dinner. Our dinner. Just the two of us. Just the two of us. She went back to her meetings, and Cormac returned to his desk. The afternoon sun streamed through the office window, illuminating the framed photo of his father that he'd moved from the old location. He pulled out the leather-bound engineering notebook his father had left him 30 years ago. The margins were filled with handwritten notes about business principles, construction techniques, and life lessons learned through decades of honest work that on the last page, his father had written a single line in careful script. Good men build things. Better men protect them. The best never let anyone steal what they built. Cormac picked up his pen and added his own note below his father's words. And they teach their children to do the same. Outside, the machines hummed with the rhythm of productivity. Orders were being filled, paychecks were being earned, and the business built on trust and hard work continued to grow. Some stories end with forgiveness and reconciliation. Others end with justice and consequences. This was the second kind.